two. Just hit stop and off when we're
Oh,
done.
there's 2 buttons.
Yeah, just those two under the red.
Cool.
I gotta remember that.
All right, you're good to go, Pat.
Okay, so this first form is
Oh man, that's right into it.
is the form that you will have your seller read before they start doing any disclosures. This tells them how to do it. And you'll see that I've highlighted paragraph 3A. You guys are not gonna see highlighting because it didn't get printed in color. I apologize for that. Yeah, you can see it up here.
Yeah,
But your copies are not gonna be colored.
Okay.
So under 3A, do not leave any questions blank or unanswered unless the section is not applicable. Answer all questions and provide all document information, explanation to every yes response in the blank lines or in an addendum to the disclosure form. So some of these questions are gonna be, is your property in an HOA? And it's yes. So they want you to explain every yes, so you just simply rewrite property in an HOA. Because there's some lines, you'll see what I'm talking about when we get to some more forms. Then we have, what's the next one that's highlighted? Oh, okay, and many questions under 2B. Many questions in the disclosure form ask if you are aware of a particular condition, fact, or item. If you do not know the answer to this question, then you are not aware and should answer the question no. Remember, this is the seller. The seller's reading this, not you guys. This is the seller that's reading it. Do you need a form?
I have it on my
Okay. And so if you're sitting there with them, because I sit with my sellers when they answer these questions, I don't let them answer them on their own, because I usually have to go back and have them correct things. Because they still don't answer them right, even though it says right here, if you don't know if you're not aware of it, it's a no answer. And so I will sit there and they'll say, well, I don't know. And I said, then I guess you don't know, right? And they say, right. And I say, okay, then say no. It's like, right, it's like, it's guiding them almost. They don't want to do anything wrong, but they don't want to say yes to something if they're not aware of it. And it's right, they should never say yes if they're not aware of something. And then they will have questions, that's on the TDS and the transfer disclosure statement and the seller property questionnaire. So I'm gonna go on to the next page on this, and it would be G at the top. That one is highlighted in yellow. G, if you have learned to live with an issue, condition, or problem, disclose it. Sometimes you forget about your issues in the house, so you have to start really thinking about it. But if you have any issues in the house, disclose it. Even if you think the buyer's not gonna like this, but if I disclose this, the buyers won't wanna buy my house. Well, what happens if they find out about this issue after they buy the house? You got a real problem. Right, so you definitely disclose things, even though it's a real negative, you feel it's a negative in selling your house. Yeah, it probably is, but somebody's still gonna buy it, and knowing this negative. Then we have, I have to do this, I can't tell what's yellow and what isn't. Completing the sections below. Okay, so this is in the real estate transfer disclosure under number 4, section 1. So we have 2 sections there that are section 1. And I'm gonna go to the second one. It allows sellers to incorporate and provide reports and disclosures that relate to the information requested in that disclosure form. Providing those substituted disclosure does not eliminate the responsibility to fully and completely disclose all information. We now go to this thing. You have another group, 4 pages here. Looks like this. That's it. Yep, that's the page I want you to look at right now, okay? These are not gonna be up on top. At the bottom, I have it circled in orange and highlighted in yellow. So this whole thing talks about, there's 3 boxes in the transfer disclosure statement, which I think is our next form that we're gonna come to. In section 1, there are 3 boxes. And it talks about what is a substituted disclosure. Each paragraph has its own little description there, and then the bottom line is, should a seller check the no substitute disclosure? Now remember, you've got reports. you've got a preliminary title report, you've got a natural hazard disclosure report, you've got the pest report, the home report. Are those substituted disclosures? Absolutely not, unless the person who did that report says, sure, you can use this, and you guys don't have to disclose anything, because you can just use my report and I'll take full responsibility. No inspector is gonna do that. Okay, so the bottom line is, in most cases, no substituted disclosure, in most cases, that's the one you will check. It says yes. It is the third box on the TDS. In those rare cases where there will be a substituted disclosure, as distinguished from the NHD and the supplemental disclosures and reports, then one of the first two boxes may need to be checked. Those situations are unlikely. Okay, we might come back to this form. Right now, you're gonna see it on the next form that we go to. In section B, remember, seller is reading this, telling them how to answer the TDS, which is our next form. Keep that in mind. They're reading this first because it's explaining the next form. In section 2B, 2A, it asks to check a series of boxes indicating what appliances and fixtures that the property has. It talks about window screens, and it talks about air conditioners and heaters and water softeners and blah, 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 all that stuff. And in section 2B, it's are any of them not working properly? Is there a defect? Is there something like that wrong with all these items? Any of these items that you checked, yes. In section, what's the next one we're gonna go to? There is a section 3 to, I'm gonna stop this form. We're gonna go right to the TDS so that you can actually see what I'm talking about. But on the bottom of page 3, when a seller is answering questions and she or he has to write a lot, so let's say there's a lot of things wrong, and there's too many yes answers, and they have to write a lot of stuff on a line, and there's not enough room, this will automatically go to another addendum. It's called a text overflow addendum. So don't worry about it. They can just keep typing and typing away, and another form will automatically pop up and take over their type. We'll let them type on that form. Pardon?
Are we on page 2 or 3?
That was page 3, and we're gonna go to the real estate transfer disclosure statement. So here we are. We've got section 1, section 2. Do you see that? Okay, so at the very top, you have to fill all of these in completely. So the disclosure statement concerns the real estate property situated in the city of, wherever the property is, it would be that city. In the county of, you have to know the county that the property is sitting in. In the state of California, because you're only licensed for the state of California if you're selling a home here. I mean, I don't care about the other states. We don't want to see those unless, anyway. And then again, there's a civil code, and the date that you start preparing this, the date that the seller starts preparing this would go right in there. You see that section 1102 of the civil code as of, and then a date. And it was way back in the 90s that the civil code came into place. And I think it has to do with the agency relationship disclosure. So here you see that 3 boxes I was talking about. Inspection reports completed pursuant to the contract of sale or receipt of deposit. And then the second box is additional inspection reports and disclosures. And then the third one, no substituted disclosures for this transfer. That's the one you're gonna check. I would say, well, they say almost all the time. It's very unlikely that you won't check that box. And you're going to get these forms in from other listing agents where these boxes are checked. The other 2, they don't know this. They don't know about this form that's in CAR. I pulled it right out of CAR. And they just have never read it or found it, or the broker has never told them about it. Under number 2, seller's information. The seller discloses the following information with the knowledge that even though there is not a warranty, prospective buyers may rely on this information in deciding whether and on what terms to purchase the subject property. Seller hereby authorizes any agent representing any principal in this transaction to provide a copy of this statement to any person or entity. An entity is a company, property held in a trust, a probate, something that isn't just an individual. Entity, I gotta see where I was, I don't know where I was, guys. Entity in connection with any actual or anticipated sale of the property. The following are representations made by the seller and are not representations of the agent, if any. This information is a disclosure and is not intended to be part of any contract between the buyer and seller. It's not part of the contract, although in the contract it says the seller will provide a TDS, a real estate transfer disclosure statement. And then you've got seller is or is not occupying the property. That actually makes pretty big difference, because if they're not occupying the property, they probably don't know a lot about the property, and don't know as much as they would if they lived there. So make sure that your sellers mark those boxes. Even if you have like a listing agent that's not in Keller Williams, when they send this in to us, and Renee and I review this paperwork, we actually reject it, because we need to know if the seller is living in the property or not, because it changes their answers. There's just no doubt about it. If you don't live in the property, you don't know all the things that are wrong with it. And then you have all these items under A. Yeah, John?
Quick question, as far as that's concerned, are there certain parts, and if you're gonna get to this, don't worry about it, so, any parts that they're exempt from if they don't live in the property?
No. They're not exempt from
Just to
anything.
the best of their knowledge?
Yeah, they're not exempt if they're, right, if they don't live in the property, if they live in the property, they are not exempt from answering any of these. They have to answer them all. They can answer, if it's, are you aware of, they can answer no. Yeah, because they're not. Anyway, so under A, here the seller would mark everything this house has, even if it's not working. Okay? And you've got the difference, like a range and an oven. And what else would be similar here? Range and oven. You have to figure out if it's a range or an oven. So an oven is usually a built-in thing into a cabinet, and a range is freestanding. Like you could unplug it and pull it out easily. That's it, like if they ask you, I don't know if I have a range or an oven, I have both. Well, maybe they do have both, but it'd be very unlikely. Yes. And then the microwave, they would answer the microwave if it's staying. If it's a portable microwave and it's not connected to the house, that would not be, unless it's staying, they would not mark microwave. There's a dishwasher, trash compactors, well, you can go through this whole thing. Rain gutters, they don't know sometimes if they have rain gutters. And because I'm there with them, I'll say, well, let's go outside and take a look. Just, let's see if you have rain gutters. And it's like, oh, yeah, I guess we have rain gutters. And it's like, some people don't know much about their houses. Carbon monoxide devices, they should know if they have that or not. And if they don't have it, you can tell them they have to have it in. They have to install them before, you should do it before inspections start, but you have to have it before the appraiser comes. Because if it's not there, the appraiser then has to come back out, because they take a picture of it. They take a picture of the smoke detectors and the carbon monoxide detectors, because the underwriter wants to see them, the lender. And if they aren't there, that means the appraiser has to come back out and the buyer has to pay more money, because now they have to pay for the appraiser again to come back out. Yes, if that were me, I would say, seller, pay for this appraiser to come back out, but I don't know, it's up to the agent. And then we've got fire alarms, TV antennas. A lot of times they won't know if they have a TV antenna, especially if they live in a townhouse or a condo. They might not know. So what are some interesting ones in here? Well, there's central air conditioning, and there's evaporative coolers. We don't have so many evaporative coolers in the Bay Area and down along the coast. Evaporative coolers you find in Arizona, in the desert, because they cool your house off very nicely. We had one. We had an evaporator, and it does a nice job. It puts moisture into your house. Because when you're looking at 3% humidity out in the desert, it's pretty dry, and so you need some moisture in your house. Wow. If anybody else's phones are on, please turn them off or turn them to silent.
Sorry about that. Sorry, Jimmy.
We have the wall window air conditioner, sprinkler system. Newer homes all have them, like I think if they were built after 1997 or something. There's some date in there where they all had to have ceiling sprinklers. Anything else, water softeners, gazebos, you can look through it. So when we get over to that third column, we have water heater. Is it gas, solar, or electric? New homes today are being built all electric. They don't have gas anymore. So we won't see that yet unless we're selling brand new homes. You know, because we resale homes. Water supply, it's either city well or a private utility. And some places in Fremont still do have a well, but they probably also have city water. And in that case, I think you would probably mark them both, because if they're watering their lawns with well. I know Steve has a well on his property. And you find him over there along where, oh, you don't know where he lives. Right, I don't think I better tell you. And then gas supply is either utility or bottled. You get bottled gas out in the rural areas, because I grew up in a rural area back in the Midwest, and we had the tank. I don't even know how many gallons it is. It's hundreds, and you have it filled up once a year, every other year. I don't know how often it was filled up. I know we used to play on it. Window screens. Now they should mark window screens even if they're missing some. If they have them. If they don't have any, they wouldn't mark it. But if they have some, they have to mark window screens, and then later on they will say, ooh, but some of them are missing. That kind of thing. Okay, any questions on well, let's go down below, the exhaust fans. It's interesting how many people don't know where their exhaust fans are. Like when in your house, can you think about where your exhaust fans are? Like in the washer dryer area? Is that what you're saying?
No, in the bathrooms.
Oh, in the bathrooms, yes, and also washer dryer areas
Yeah.
if it's in the house.
Right.
Where else is there an exhaust fan, typically? Kitchen, yeah, right. And people don't know this. Like, it's really interesting, like, how can you not know you don't have an exhaust fan over your stove, or you turn it on in the bathroom and you don't know you have one? So sometimes I just jog their memory. We're not supposed to answer these ourselves, but I can jog their memory. And then 220 volt wiring, hardly anybody knows that. And now they should be adding in I think it's the 210, that's for the electric car. They should be adding that one into these forms pretty soon. I think it's 210. 220 is when you have an electric oven, that's 210. Electric dryer is 210. If you have a gas dryer, then you do not have 210 in there. If you have a gas oven and stove top and oven, like our cooktop is gas, but our oven is electric. Right, and so it's 22 is those three-prong things. You know those three-prong sockets that you find in your house? Yeah, that's 220. And I don't know what a 210 looks like. Fireplace, if there's not a fireplace, they should say NA. Like, all these lines should be filled in with something, not NA. And then the gas, if there's a gas starter to the fireplace, if the fireplace was a yes, like in the living room, is there a gas starter for that fireplace? It's NA, or the box is checked that there is. The roof type, hardly anybody knows what kind of roof they have, so you go outside and take a look. Yes, that's if it's not raining or something, or if they really don't know, they would put unknown, but they have to put something in. And the age of the roof, a lot of them don't know the age of the roof. If they know the age, they can do a specific, 25 years old, or it's 20 to 30 years old, or 5 to 10 years old, or unknown. But you gotta put something in there. And then that last sentence, are there, to the best of your knowledge, the seller, any of the above that are not in working operating condition? That's a yes or a no question. It is not leave blank question. Any questions on this page? Because I know I went through it kind of fast. We have a lot to go through. On the next page, B. This is so dark on my computer. Oh, are you the seller aware? This is where it starts those questions. Are you the seller aware? And of any significant defects, malfunctions in any of the following. Again, this is a yes or no question. It is not leave blank question. They have to answer yes or no. If it's a no, then nothing else is filled in. If it is a yes, then other things need to be addressed, like what's the defect? What's the malfunction? It's something here or other, or you gotta let the buyer know what the malfunction is. What would be one that's pretty in, windows sometimes are malfunctioning because the seal is broken, and you get that's what foggy windows, when you look through somebody's windows and they're foggy, you know, they're not clear, it looks like you want to wipe it off, get that film off, and you can't because it's in between the windows. What else would be, sidewalks, driveways, maybe. We'll go on down to installation of the listed appliance, but we're not gonna read that. Down to C, again, it's are you aware of? So these are yes and no questions. Substance, materials, or products which may be an environmental hazard, such as, but not limited to, asbestos, formaldehyde, radon gas, lead-based paint, mold, fuel, chemical storage tanks, and contaminated soil or water on the subject property. We all hope that that's a no, but once in a while it's a yes. And then they have to explain what it is. And if it's any of those, it would probably be lead-based paint, asbestos, possibly mold. People don't like to use the word mold. Features, and number 2, features of the property shared in common with adjoining landowners, such as walls, fences, driveways, whose use or responsibility for maintenance may have an effect on the subject property. Because right, if you have fences they're shared in common, the two parties that own that fence are supposed to replace them or repair them, not just the person selling their property. Right, and so typically in the Bay Area, that one is going to be a yes, simply because of fences. Now, if they're a condo or a townhouse, it's also gonna be walls. Sometimes driveways are shared. Can't think of anything else off the top of my head. If it's a yes, they have to explain down below. Any encroachments, easements, or similar matters that may affect your interest in the subject property. Easements, I know there's a property out there where the driveway is an easement to the back of the property. If they should ever subdivide, that driveway will probably be an easement for all of those properties, because that's the only way you can get to that back house is through that driveway. And there are some in Newark also, there's some easements there on driveways. That's, again, is the pretty common one. Room additions, structural modifications, or other alterations or repairs made without necessary permits. People do it all the time. I did it. I put in a new water heater. When he put it in, I said, when do you get the permit? He said, oh, you're supposed to get that. Okay, well, it's too late now. Right. So, right, it's just, and people do it, and the thing that's not good about it is that should your house have an issue that requires the home insurance to pay, it won't pay if it wasn't permitted. Right, and so you disclose these things, like I disclosed my water heater is not permitted. Right, and it doesn't make it a bad installation, it just means it was not permitted through the city. The city standards are pretty low, so most people do things better than what the city requires. Room additions, structural modifications, or other alterations or repairs not in compliance with building codes. Number 6, fill which is compacted or otherwise, on the property or any portion thereof. The only way that they would really know an answer to this is if they had bought that house brand new and watched it being made and saw the dirt was being brought in and filled into the ground, you know, making it level. Yeah, that's the only, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No.
Regarding to the previous slide.
Oh, to the previous, I don't want to talk about it, but sure.
About the insurance, you said if it's
Oh.
unpermitted, the insurance wouldn't insure the house?
No, it wouldn't insure if that was the cause of a fire, then they wouldn't. Like if you did all your electrical work without permit,
Yeah.
and there was an electrical fire, they would not cover it.
But they would trace that it's the cause, the the cause of the fire is the work that you did without permit. If it's caused by somewhere else.
Yes, if it's something else and not the electrical, then they would cover it.
Okay.
Yeah, but they won't, but if it's not permitted, they're not going to cover the fire in a house if that unpermitted item was not permitted. Yeah, and a lot of things out there are not permitted, lots and lots and lots. And you just kinda hope that the insurance company won't do their check. They do. Number 7, let me see, fill guide, we just touched on the fill thing. Number 7, any settling from any cause or slippage, slidage, or other soil problems. Again, this happened in Fremont. It happened back in the late 1990s. And they had so much rain one year that the hills started to slip and dirt started to fill into the homes. And you can still see where the big slippage happened up in the hills, over in the Mission area. There's a big, I can't describe it, part of the hill is missing. And it slipped, it just got too wet and it came down. And they just have to answer yes or no to that question. Flooding, drainage, or grading problems, that definitely is an issue in many places. Because homes have sunk, old homes, sometimes the foundations have sunk, or they weren't maybe built properly. And water, if they've sunk a little, now water is going to start forming when it rains towards the house, and all water is supposed to drain away from a house. It's something to really notice when you're showing properties. And if you see that the backyard, especially it's the backyard usually, if they are, if it's slanting towards the house, they're gonna have water buildup. And that water buildup gradually hurts the foundation. Right. And so they might have to put in French drains. French drains are a special type of draining water away from your backyard. They're underground. What was that, flooding? Okay, number 9, major damage to the property or any of the structures from fire, earthquake, floods, or landslides. 10, any zoning violations and not conforming using violations of setback requirements. I don't even know how to answer that one. That again is usually fences. People build their own fences and they come too far out, and then it's at a corner, the house is at a corner, and people coming up at the corners can't see around the fence. So that becomes a setback issue. Neighborhood noise problems, another nuisance, interesting one. Because when you live in a place long enough, you don't hear the noise anymore, right? You really don't. And so it's like, no, there's no noise here. I said, well, you know, you need to think about it. Are there any dogs in the neighborhood that you hear barking? Well, yeah. You know, our neighbor has a dog. I said, well, you probably should put a dog down. You know? And are there any kids that play out in the street a lot? Yeah, but we like them. I said, well, the next person might not like kids much. You know, I think you should just say kids playing in the street. And it actually could be a plus, because the next person might have a family and, wow, this is a good neighborhood. Or it is, what would be another one? Oh, trains, oh goodness. Right, they're all over. If you can hear the train, especially when you're doing open houses, and they didn't say that there was any train noise, you might wanna alter your agent visual disclosure inspection. And alter it and then, yeah, and say there are trains here. Any other nuisances? Oh, fire trucks, if you live near a fire station, if you live near a police station, police probably not so bad, but fire station for sure, because their alarms go off in the middle of the night a lot. Then CC&Rs and other deed restrictions, a lot of people do not know if they have CC&Rs. You can find them on a title report. You have to read your title reports. We're not gonna go through that today, but you have to read your title reports, and in there it says CC&Rs on almost, I would say on 80% of the properties have CC&Rs, not just HOAs and things like that. They have properties, the properties like Cabrillo. It's over in the, where would you wanna say Cabrillo is? North end of Fremont, between the freeway and Fremont Boulevard. Back in there, they have their CC&Rs are, you can't have any roosters, you can't have any chickens, because it's so old that the people had that, they were farms. You can't have tractor, I mean, just crazy things in these CCNRs. Can't have horses, can't have cattle, you know, because that's what lived here, that's what was here. I don't know where some more forms, does anybody have any more forms? Okay, then we have, we'll need a couple of more, because we have three more people coming, him and two more. Homeowners association, they have to know if there's a homeowners association, whether they live there or not, because they're paying the dues. You never let your tenants pay the dues, the owner pays HOA dues. So you will know if there's a HOA in there. And if it's a yes, you explain. Anytime there's a yes, you have to explain. Any common area, facilities such as pools, tennis, walkways, that kind of thing. And if you live in an HOA and you do have common areas, you definitely would state that. And most HOAs have common areas. Not most townhouses and condos. And I think that's about it, because like Glenmore is an HOA housing development, and they have a common area of a pool, but you have to pay to belong to it, you don't automatically get it. So therefore, I would not consider that a yes, but they are an HOA, and you would have to say yes to that. And they got some weird old CCNRs in there. Number 15, any notices of abatement and citation against the property. They should know, they should have gotten some notices in the mail. Some people don't like to open their mail when they think it's something like that. So, but you will find them on preliminary title reports. Any lawsuit by or against the seller threatening to an effect, we're gonna bring up some more forms. Affecting the real property claims. This is so huge. Last year I had a guy down in San Jose. He had restraining orders against his neighbor, and the neighbor had restraining orders against him. I have to disclose this. And I said, you gotta disclose it. He says, well, I'm not going to. And I said, then I will. I said, you can't have the next owner come in here and not know that you have a restraining order against your neighbor and he against you. And he says, well, I'm the bad guy. He says, we'll just tell everybody that comes in that the disliked person in this neighborhood is me. I says, okay, I can do that. And neighbors would come into that open house and they'd say, oh, are we ever glad he's moving away? He is so full. It's like, oh, he truly was the bad guy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a legal question, so you don't have to answer, but if the restraining order is against the individual, not the property itself.
Correct, it's the
So
individual.
once the individual moves away, the restraining order goes with him or her.
I don't know. I don't know if it does or not. I hope not.
No, but it doesn't stay with the house.
Oh, no, because it's against that person, it's not against the
Right,
house.
right, okay.
Right, but that other person who he had a restraining order on now, stayed with him and he wasn't moving. But all the neighbors said, we never had any problems until your client moved in here. And I grew to find out what those problems were, because he was pretty nasty to me too. Yes. Anyway, any questions on those 16 questions? Okay, we're gonna go down to D. This is why we don't have to have a water heater smoke detector or what's the other one, carbon monoxide. The carbon monoxide water heater smoke detector forms, because it's already in the real estate transfer disclosure statement. The seller certifies that the property, as of the close of escrow, will be in compliance with section and the health and safety code by having operable smoke detectors, which are approved, listed, and installed in accordance with the state fire marshal regulations and applicable local standards. And number 2, the seller certifies that the property, as of the close of escrow, will be in compliance with section 1920, whatever, of the health and safety code by having the water heater tank braced, anchored, or strapped in place in accordance with the applicable law. This has to be done before the appraiser comes out, guys. These old houses don't have these things done. Like, they'll have smoke detectors, but they might not have carbon monoxide. If they don't have carbon monoxide detectors, I have one. So that, and then I'll tell the appraiser, because if the appraiser is the one that's calling me, that I need to meet you out there. Because then I'm gonna bring my plug-in carbon monoxide detector, because you can plug them into, you can buy something to plug in, and I'll do that so that he can take a picture of it. I know, and then I get on my case with the seller, hey, you gotta get those carbon monoxide detectors in there. They have to be there before the close of escrow. And the last page on this one, this is, don't forget to always have the seller sign at the very top. And then we have agent inspection disclosure. This one is done by the seller's agent. It is mandatory that you do an agent visual inspection disclosure. It is in the contract and you have to do it. If you don't have a completed TDS. And in the contract, if you don't have a completed TDS, the buyer can back out anytime they want. They can, even if they remove contingencies. Not if they removed them up front with their offer they have, but if they have a contingency and then this is not completely filled in, they remove the contingencies, they find something, hey, you didn't disclose this or whatever, or you didn't give me your AVID and you disclosed this stuff on it, they can back out. Just, you've gotta have a completed one. Now so when my seller is signing this, I typically don't have one. So I will put in there agent notes the following items and I'll say AVID to follow. Because I don't have it with me. And they should not be signing this if I'm not giving them the agent visual inspection disclosure when they sign this. You understand that? Because they're saying they're receiving that form, and they're not, because I don't have it done yet. So I will just put in their agent notes following items to follow. Under number 4, that's the buyer's agent. In this office, you have to do one. Not all offices require it, and sometimes you won't get one from the buyer's agent if you are representing the seller. We can't make them give us one. We ask them for one, like 2-3 times, and if we just don't get it, we can't force somebody else to do it. We can force you guys to do it by holding your paychecks, right? It's like, that's what we do. And so, but the buyer's agent, when you are representing a buyer, you will complete this. And then down below, everything is signed again, saying buyers and sellers may wish to obtain professional advice and or inspections of the property and to provide for appropriate provisions in the contract between buyer and seller. We acknowledge a receipt of a copy of this statement. Some of my sellers don't want to sign it until they get it, right, that AVID. And it's fine with me. They don't have to. They can sign it later if they want, but I'll get that agent visual to them very quickly. Next page, agent visual inspection disclosure. Okay, so again, you have to fill everything out. The city, situated in the city of, say the city, the county of, gotta know the county that the city is sitting in, because if you're working out in the foothills somewhere, you might not know that. Do you have it up?
The next thing that pops up on the screen is the quick item.
Oh, he didn't, okay, just go on. Go to the next one.
Next one, no.
Go to the next one. Just keep going until you get to, I didn't want them there. Go to the AVID there. So, you have to know what county you're working in, you're buying or selling in. It's just, you have to. There's county rules. And you have to follow the county rules. Sometimes there's city rules and you have to follow the city rules. And so you completely fill that in. Let's say it's a duplex. Now you check that box, or a triplex or a fourplex, because we can sell 1 to 4 units. So if that is the case, you have to have an AVID for each unit. You do not put all of the information for all those units on one form. So this would be unit 1, unit A, unit whatever. But you have to have one of these for each unit. For the most part, you're gonna do single family homes. And then you don't check that box. The inspection is performed by the real estate broker firm name, which we now have 2 names. You can use either one, Keller Williams Benchmark Properties or Keller Williams Advisors. Got the okay today, the DBA came in, and you can be a Keller Williams Advisors or Keller Williams Benchmark Properties. You are not Keller Williams Realty. Do not use that. We'll knock it back to you every time, because we are not Keller Williams Realty. You have to buy that name if you want that name. Right? So we're either Benchmark Properties or Advisors. So, in the first page, it tells the seller and the buyer what you don't do. Right, it doesn't tell them what you do, it tells them what you don't do. And I'm not gonna go through that, but you're not, I mean, a couple of things, you're not expected to go into the attic and you're not expected to go into the house. Okay, yeah, oh, yeah, not your hand up?
No, no, it's my favorite part.
If you go under the house, and I know some agents do, you know, I hope you get back out. I had a property inspector that got caught under the house, all alone, house was vacant, no phone on her, and, she panicked, and all her muscles tightened up, and she couldn't move, she was caught. And she says, I thought, wow, I'm gonna die. You know, that kind of thing went through her, I'm gonna die, you know, this is a vacant house. And then she said, I realized that, if I relax my muscles, I should be able to just inch my way out, and of course, that's what she did. She had to get over the panic. Yeah, so be careful if you go into the house, if you're not a skinny little person. So on page 2, I'm not going, unless you want me to go over more on page 1, I will, but otherwise, I don't want to. I find it boring. The buyer and seller might find it interesting. So on the top of the page 2, if this property is a duplex, triplex, or fourplex, you have to put in which one you're doing. So again, a single family, you don't have to do anything, but you always, in case these papers get mixed up, you have to make sure you keep the right ones together. Because not everybody does electronic signing. Now we have, this form is actually gonna take a little while. So, I'm gonna tell you how I do AVIDs. I go a little bit above and beyond what you're supposed to do. It's supposed to be a visual inspection. I don't just do a visual inspection, I do a little bit more. So anyway, but in the entry, so when you come into a house, or the entrance to the house, for me, that can possibly be looking at the door from the outside or actually entering the house. I might put both of those things in there. And so you look at the entry, you see if there's anything wrong, and you look at the tile, and you look at the walls, and you look above the door to see if there's any cracks. Because that's where you find cracks, are above doors and windows, settling cracks. But you don't say settling cracks, you say cracks. You don't say little cracks, you don't say, unless you can measure it, you don't say a 2-inch crack or whatever. You just say crack or cracks. And if there's cracks in the tile, if there's some tile chips, you write those kind of things down. If the floor is scuffed, floor is scuffed. Now you get the living room. The living rooms are usually the cleanest. You find, for me, I find the least amount of issues with the living room unless there's a fireplace, and sometimes you get some fireplace issues, like the fireplace appears like it has a lot of black soot. You can't say it's black soot because you don't know. You don't know what they were burning in there. Anyway, but, so you call it without using, you're not an inspector, so you can't say things that you aren't sure of. We did a fireplace one time, the inspector was there, and she said, I am done inspecting this house, there's bones in the fireplace. I wanna know what died in here. The seller was there, and he was like this 6'6.5" guy. And he says, I'm just lazy, and I throw my chicken bones in there when I'm done eating them. It's like, just, right. It was so funny. So I'm afraid we don't always know what's inside the fireplaces. And so in the living room, you would, again, be looking at windows, see if there's any foggy windows, see if there's any window screens missing, see if there's any cracks above the windows, scuff marks on the walls. Sometimes they've taken down their pictures and there's holes in the walls. You might say, holes in the walls the size of nails or something like that, but you don't say little or big. You know, you just can't use those kind of words. You get into too much trouble. Dining room, you're doing the same thing. Just looking at the floors, the walls, the carpet, if it's dirty, if it's soiled. In the kitchen, there's a lot more to do. So in the kitchen, I actually go through and I just pop each cabinet door just to make sure that they don't fall off. And I will open a drawer a tiny bit to see if any of the fronts of the cabinet, of the drawers fall off, because they have before. One fell off and my buyer was with me. I said, oh my God, I don't know what to do. The door fell off. And so he went out to his car and got some tools and he put the door back on. But he ended up buying the place. Anyway, but so I just go through and do that very quickly. I don't like open it up and look inside. I just, put your hands underneath. Yeah, you do really quickly. I turn the water on, see if the water's working, because they're supposed to keep the water hooked up, make sure that there's hot water. Once in a while, I'll even turn the burners to the oven on, to see if they ignite or get hot. But you don't have to do that, okay? It's not required. What else would I do in there? Scuff marks, again, wall marks, the typical stuff that you're gonna do throughout the whole house. In other rooms, so if there's other rooms, like there might be a breakfast area. If the hubs are really big, there's definitely gonna be other rooms. Then you've got your halls and stairways. These are, when you're walking up the stairs, if the railing is loose, absolutely write that down. Railing loose, that's all you have to write. If the carpet is really wore out, you'd say carpet appears to be worn. Carpet looks like it's heavily used, something like that. If the stairs squeak, say the stairs squeak. Hallway, like the lights aren't working in the hallway or in the ceiling, write it down. Light does not come on with the switch. Bedrooms 1, 2, they only give you 3 spaces for bedrooms and bathrooms. If you need more, you'll use other rooms. And for bedrooms, sliding doors, when I go outside, like sometimes there's sliding doors in the master. And if it's really hard to open, I will say, sliding door, very difficult to open. Again, you look for the filmy windows, the filmy doors, all that same stuff. For the bathroom, you'll look for stains in the sink, cracks in the sink, a discoloration around faucets, discoloration around, and in the shower area. If it needs a cleaning, like the shower pan appears to need cleaning, I do that a lot, because I don't like dirty showers. So I'll say, or the whole house, at the end, there's an area where you can just write, and I'll say the whole house needs a deep cleaning, or the whole house needs to be cleaned, or all the carpet throughout the house needs to be cleaned or replaced, things like that. There might be holes in the carpet, and you would say that. In the bathrooms, what else in the bathroom would you say? Teresa, what else would you say in a bathroom? No?
That's pretty much.
Yeah, oh, the mirror, the backing of the mirror. You'll see right above the faucets, sometimes it's blackened. Okay, so you can't write down some things, like it's caused from water splashing up underneath it. That's what causes it, and it disintegrates. But you can't say that, so you just say discoloration at the bottom of the mirror near the faucets, or near the sink, things like that. I think that's about all there is or cracked mirrors, you could say that, broken mirror, all those kind of things. Other rooms, if there's other rooms, you would put them there. And we have quite a few areas for other rooms as I go on to the next page, Adrian. Additional rooms and structures, you can use an addendum for it, and if you check that box, an addendum will automatically pop up for you. Garage parking, a lot of stuff in the garages wow. You've got your discolored floors, maybe your floors are painted. Floors are typically cracked because they're not, cars park in them all the time, and so you will always be able to tell where the car parks because there's cracks there. But you can't say that, you just have to say cracks on the floor, or crack, or discolorations. You can use colors, like a rusty discoloration on the floor, a black discolorations on the floor, no sheetrock on the walls, or the walls contain sheetrock. There are a lot of holes in the sheetrock. Yeah, so you just look around, because there's so much out there that you can write about, and you put it down. Parking, so maybe they don't have a garage, maybe it's just a carport. You would write whatever you see. Again, there's almost always cracks and stains on the cement. Pretty much given. Exterior of the building and yard. Okay, so you got fences that are falling over. You've got boards that, like posts, they're leaning. So you would say leaning fence, leaning posts. Oh, Rosie, oh my gosh, I'm glad you're here. And you've got roots, like if there's tree roots in the yard, I would say tree roots, because they can become trip hazards. I fell in the backyard. There was a big hole, and the grass had grown up because it was spring, and I stepped in it. Wow, did I go down. Had that been a buyer, They could easily have sued that owner of that property. I don't know, just be careful when you take your clients back there. You know, and warn them, tell them, you know, the ground is going to be uneven back here. So you must be careful, or let's not walk it at all. Weeds, if there's too many weeds, I just say, appears to be a lot of weeds in the backyard. I never say there are weeds, because maybe they were planted. So it appears. Or you can always do appears, it looks like, that kind of thing. But you can't say exactly what it is, because you don't know. And then you've got that exterior of the building. Sometimes you can see cracked foundations when you walk around. And you might say, there's a horizontal crack, a vertical crack over on the, if you know it's north, south, east, west, you can use that. I don't, so I have to say, looking at the house from the front, or in the backyard, because I don't know the direction of the house at all. And I would say the foundation has a lateral crack or a vertical crack. And you would put in, if any of the, you know those little screens that you have on a house that's raised, when there's a raise, those little screens, you would say if there's holes or they're missing. Because that's how animals get in. That's how those possums get in and bang on your pipes at night. Right, that's how we had ours, we had possums under our house. Oh man, 2 o'clock in the morning, they're banging on the pipes. So you look for those kind of things, you look for stucco that's missing. Anybody come up with other things? If the, too much water settling towards the house. Oh, driveway, cracks in the sidewalks, and the walkways around the backyard. There's a fire pit back there. Oh, another person, oh, glad you can make it. But I think, do we have enough, Adrian?
Ask for 5.
Okay. Anything else that you guys, yes, John?
Do you ever address odors?
Yes. But I also tend to smell every little odor there is. So it depends on, like, I could smell skunk. It doesn't mean there's a lot of skunks, and there's a lot of skunks in Fremont, I know there are, especially if you live in Niles. What other odor?
What animal urine?
If I smell it, yeah. I would say there's an undetected odor in the sandbox, or something like that. Because I can't say it's urine or feces, because I'm not gonna go in there and
You're
look.
gonna touch it, right? Feel what it.
Yeah, right. I'm gonna get out that shovel and dig up that cat stuff. Anyway, so the person who performs, yes,
I was
Rosie?
thinking, what if the house has a real weird sound, scent because of the.
I can't hear you.
What if the house has a odd scent because of the way they cook? You know, where they cook?
Oh, I would definitely say that. Cooking smells in the kitchen,
Okay.
or it's cooking, I can't say cooking smells. The kitchen smells as if they do a lot of cooking with spices or,
Okay.
well, you can't say that. No, my God, don't do that. I mean, yeah, if you smell my house at Christmas, you'd have to say, ooh, this house smells like a Norwegian house. What?
The forms are there.
Oh, okay. So if you guys need some forms over there?
That's
Oh, Adrian's gonna get them for you. Person who performs the ABID signs in the middle. You see where that's yellowed right in the middle? And you have to sign again. You have to sign down below. I think I have an old form in here. Yes, it's from 6/19. I did not update my form. Sellers are no longer need to sign. They can initial if they want.
Which page are you?
I'm on page 3. Yeah, if we have time at the end, I'll pull up, oh, I can't, I'm not connected to that. But the new AVID just has the seller initialing on the buyers, and on the sellers too. They have to initial each page, but they don't have to sign the last page. So if this is an old form, I really do apologize. We're on to the seller property questionnaire. Any questions on an AVID, guys? They're kind of fun to do. I do them with my buyer. Yeah, and oh my gosh, when I tell them what I'm doing, oh, do they go through the house and look for things that are wrong? Oh, man. And it's good because they still wanna buy it. Yeah, you know, it's like, but they really help find stuff. Seller property questionnaire, so you gotta put in the address, you gotta put in the assessor's parcel number. I don't know why the seller property questionnaire requires it, and so many of the other forms do not, but you have to put it in. We will reject it if it's not there. Even if it's done by the buyer, we reject this one. Then we have situated in the city and the county of blank, California. Mine's really dark, is that one really? Okay. So we have disclosure limitations. The following are, this is number one. The following are representations made by the seller and are not the representations of the agent. If any, agent if any. This disclosure statement is not a warranty of any kind by the seller or any agent and is not a substitute for any inspection or warranties the principal may wish to obtain. This disclosure is not intended to be part of the contract between buyer and seller unless otherwise specified in writing. Broker and any real estate licensee, losing my place, or other person working with or through the broker has not verified information provided by the seller. A real estate broker is qualified to advise on the real estate transaction. If seller and buyer desire legal advice, they should contact an attorney. So we have, I feel like, okay, no, this is up to date. Okay, so in here, number 5. Again, the same things apply here as, are you aware? You know, if you're not aware of something, it's a no. If you are aware of it, it's a yes and you explain. So under number 5, this is so dark. Reports, inspections, disclosures, warranties, maintenance recommendations, estimates, studies, surveys, or other documents, whether prepared in the past or present, including any previous transaction, and whether or not seller acted upon the item pertaining to the condition or repair of the property, or any improvement on the property in the past, now or proposed, or easements, encroachments, boundary disputes affecting the property, whether oral or in writing, and whether or not provided in this to the seller. This is where you can say, yes, you have reports. You don't do it on the TDS. For those of you who were not here, you always do no substitute on the TDS on page 1. But anyway, so here is where you're gonna list your reports you have. Your pest report, your general property, the home inspection report, the roof report, the pool report, the preliminary title report, the natural hazard disclosure report. All these can be listed here. And then any thing that you've, documents whether prepared. Okay, anyway, read through that on your own. This is so dark, it's hard for me to read it. My green was really dark. This is where you put it. Under number 6, and it continues on to the next page, these are mandatory questions by everybody. We don't, whether you're living or you have somebody else, you've died and somebody's doing your trust, if it's a probate, if it's a real estate owned, which is REO, foreclosure, if it's an LLC, if it's anybody who's selling the property, including companies and corporations, have to fill out this section 6. There is another form that I have in here that they can use instead. But this section is the only section that they have to fill out. Now, if you are alive and well and you own a property, you have to fill out the whole thing. I don't care if you're in a trust. You have to fill out the whole thing if you're alive and own the property. Okay, so within the last 3 years, death of an occupant of the property upon the property. So it's not just in the house anymore. It used to be just in the property. Now it's also on the property. So if you think somebody's dying and just pulling them outside, that doesn't work anymore. You have to know, you have to count it even if they die on the property. You pull them out to the street, I guess you'd be okay. Anyway, number B, an order from the government health official identifying the property as being contaminated by methamphetamine. Either a yes or a no, hopefully they're no's. The release of an illegal controlled substance on or beneath the property. I don't know what they consider an illegal controlled substance, but I'm sure the government knows. Yes. But meth is one of them, but that's already covered in B. But I would expect there's heroin and all that kind of stuff that's illegal. Marijuana is not illegal anymore in this state. Whether the property is located, D, whether the property is located in or adjacent to an industrial use zone. In general, a zone or district allowing manufacturing, commercial commercial or airport use. Number E, whether the property is affected by a nuisance created by an industrial use zone. F, a lot of these will be no, but you get properties where they are in industrial areas. F, where the property is located, whether the property is located within 1 mile of a formal federal or state ordinance location in general, an area once used for the military training purpose that may contain potentially explosive munitions. I always felt that this one also would include state hospitals. I don't know if it's true, but you know, the state mental hospitals that they have I know they have them in Minnesota. We had one like, 20 miles from us. And to me, I think you should disclose it if there is something like that. A prison, if you live near a prison. You don't think so?
No,
I think you should. Because some agents, like, we have an agent here that has been working down in San Diego. No way is she gonna know things like this. Yeah, so, and you have agents down there that will work up here, like especially in LA, they'll have some clients up here, like family members. What was that one was, okay, G, whether the property is a condominium or located in a planned unit development or other common interest subdivision. So in this case, because they say condominium, that's pretty easy. Townhouses are also, because there are townhouses that are not considered condominiums. But then you've got your places like Glenmore. It's in a planned unit development. That would be considered, that would be a yes on here, because it has an HOA. And then there are other areas that would also, can't think of who they would be in Fremont right now. But anybody that has an HOA is in a planned unit development for sure. H, insurance claims affecting the property within the last 5 years. Be on it. Tell the seller to make sure they're honest about that, because it will get looked up, I think, by the underwriter. Matters affecting title in the property, they should know. They should have gotten notices in the mail. A preliminary title report will definitely show you. Gotta read those prelims, guys. I know. How many of you have ever read a full preliminary title report? John has, and you have, and you read the full thing once? Wow, very good. But look how many of you didn't raise your hand. You gotta read them. You gotta know what they are.
Yeah.
All the way through, guys. Just once. You only have to read it all the way through one time. And then when you have a property, you've gotta read the first 5-6 pages. Oh.
And I have a story about that.
How long is the story?
Not very, not
Okay,
very.
because I only have 40 minutes left,
Okay.
50 minutes
This
left.
won't take long. I sold a beautiful property in
Can you
Livermore.
talk up?
I sold a beautiful property in Livermore to a family, and the husband is the one that knows it. He said there's a road here where we live, because it's like a little circle.
You gotta speak up
Circle
louder.
of houses, and so I checked with the title company in person, because I didn't want to just get a phone call in, and I asked if that was private road, they didn't know, so they did research, they found out it was, so I think we were able to get the price cheaper for the house, because eventually they're gonna have to pay for the road too.
Mm-hmm.
We got a good deal, because I read the whole thing.
Good, good. Where are we at? Okay, matters affecting title. J, plumbing fixtures on the property, they are non-compliant plumbing fixtures as defined in Civil Code 1 mile of the law. They usually don't know if they're compliant, so they'll almost always say no. Material effect, but if they live in a house that's newer, then that's a yes, guaranteed, because I think that went into effect in 1997. That they had to have the special, the plumbing fixtures that are low flow, things like that. Material defects affecting the property not otherwise disclosed to the buyer. Okay, so that section has to be filled in, regardless of who you are. The rest of this has to be filled in by a person owning the property. So if the people are living and alive, they have to fill in the whole thing. Repairs and alterations, taking a long time. They have to state, probably on a separate sheet of paper. Like I know when I sold mine, I kept, because I'm a Realtor, I kept track of everything I did in the year I did it. And I just turned that page over to the buyer, and then I signed it. They need to write down, and I tell them, start thinking, when I'm taking a listing, start thinking about what you've done to this house and when you did it. If you don't know when you did it, say approximately, or I don't remember when. More than 10 years ago, more than 20 years ago, whatever. That was repairs to the property, including home warranty claims. Number B, any alterations, modifications, replacements, improvements, remodels to the property done for the purpose of energy or water efficiency improvement or renewable energy. guys all know what that one is, solar would be part of that one. Ongoing or reoccurring maintenance on the property, for example, drain or sewer clean out. Any part of the property being painted within the last 12 months, that is super important, especially on those ceilings where there might be some water leaking and they turn brown and now they painted them and that brown spot's gone. Whether the property was built before 1978. If yes, okay, so if no, you don't have to answer anything down below. If yes, you do have to answer the next two questions. Structural systems, appliances, defects in any of the following. I'm gonna have you just read through that on your own. You would say yes or no. If you're aware of it, it would be yes, of course. The leasing of any of the following, on or serving the property, solar systems, water softeners, that kind of thing. And any alternative septic tank. There's properties in Fremont that still have septic. So they haven't just gone away, they still do remain. Again, Steve has a septic. Probably has public now, but he has a septic on his property. Disaster relief insurance, you need to let them know if you've had any disaster relief. That would be like from earthquakes or tsunamis or the fires. Fires are going to be a big one out here, floods, all that kind of stuff. Water related and mold issues. That's a tough one. People don't like to talk about mold, but you have to let the next owner know if you had any issues with mold. Like flooding would cause mold issues. Pets, animals, and pests, you have to let them know. Again, if you had any of these, is it in the, these are in the property, some are on or in the property. Because again, when you get out into the country, you're gonna have livestock. It's not just your household pets. And I don't think fish count. If they wanna put down fish, let them put down fish. Boundaries, access, and properties used by others. That's just people having to use the driveway or part of that land that the owner, somebody else owns the land and you have to use it to get back to your house. Because it would be behind theirs or something. Landscape, pool, and spa. Let me just skip over that. If they have a pool, make sure you read through this very well, and the spa. Condominium, common interest development. I'm running out of time, that's why we're kind of skipping through these. Property being in a condominium or located in a planned unit development, it's just an automatic yes if it is. And then they've got a lot of other questions. If it's not in a condo, you'll see if applicable. You don't have to fill it out if it's not a condo or common interest development or other subdivision. Title ownership, liens, and legal claims. And you'll find this all on the preliminary title report. If they don't know it, just read your title report. Neighborhood, here you're going back into the noises again. This should probably be about the same as the form before this. If there were noises on the first form, like your train and your planes and your whatever, you should list the same things on this one. Any past or present disputes or issues with a neighbor? I know, that's a tough one, because right, sometimes personalities just don't get along. And who knows if the next one will, but it's up to the seller to figure that one out, if they have, what the dispute is, if it's worth talking about. Like my guy down in San Jose, that was worth talking about. Then there's the governmental stuff. Now, I've never had any of this pertain to any of my properties, but you will run into eminent domains under number A, letter A, rent control. Definitely, we're gonna see a lot more of that, because I think it's gonna become statewide rent control. Habitats for plants and animals, just go through that. Anything else? Oh, smoking and vaping in or on the property, that's down under 18. Any use of the property for alterations, modifications, improvements, remodeling. Letter C, any past or present known material facts that would affect the value or desirability of the property not being disclosed previously. You would put it down, like, sometimes they'll say, well, where do I put this? And I said, well, there's gonna be a place. There's a place to put everything, right? And because they, sometimes little strange things come up. And then under number 19, any additional comments, you can check that box and the form will pop up for you to fill in if there are additional comments. buyer and seller both sign this one. Remember when I told you on that last form, that there was another form you could use if you are a foreclosed product, a bank selling a foreclosed property, family selling probate, or an attorney or whoever is selling probate, trust where the owners have died and a trustee is now selling it, they could use this form and not the seller property questionnaire. Because these are the same questions. That number 4, all of those are the same questions that were on that other form. But these are mandatory by the state of California and federal government on some, that every one of these has to be answered yes or no. If you do get a foreclosure, you can come talk to me. A little bit different for foreclosures. I don't want to go into it today. But if you work with a foreclosure, they're called REOs. Whether buyer or seller, you can come and talk to me or Renee. On to the next one, water heater smoke detector. So when a transfer disclosure statement is not used, that would be again, a probate, a foreclosure, a trustee sale, something like that. You have to then use this form, the water heater smoke detector. Because remember on the transfer disclosure statement at the bottom of page 2, it said, water heater will be strapped properly, carbon monoxide will be on the, yeah, you have to use this. Because this is mandatory by the state of California. So that's, if you don't use a TDS, real estate transfer disclosure statement, you have to use this. And then you have to use that other form, the one just before this, the exempt seller disclosure. Because you wouldn't be using a seller property questionnaire. Lead-based paint. House was built before 1978, you have to give the buyer this disclosure. Because they were allowed to use lead-based paint before 1978. And I have somebody that, they're looking at a house built in the 60s, they said, I want a lead-based paint disclosure. A lead-based paint inspector. And I said, well, there's probably lead-based paint in here. It's like, because of when it was built, they probably used lead-based paint. Are you sure you still want the inspector? Because it's only harmful if you start sanding it, if it becomes airborne. It's not harmful to sand your walls and you touch your walls. I mean, that's not harmful because they've been painted over and that kind of stuff. It's only harmful if it's airborne. Keep that in mind. I grew up with lead-based paint. I teethed on my crib that had lead-based paint on it. I mean, and I'm still alive. I might not be sane, but I'm still alive.
That explains stuff.
Yes, it does. It explains a lot. Again, you have to fill in the top portion of this. Don't leave anything blank at the top. Always put these things in. If you are the buyer getting, the buyer getting these things from the seller, put the buyer's name at the top. We reject it. If you don't have names in there, we reject it. We've talked to Steve about it, and he said, yes, the names have to be in there. And if the seller didn't put names in there, get the seller to put the names in. And then if you are aware of lead-based paint, you have to talk about it. And then down below, under number 1, where it's highlighted, we have reviewed the information, have reviewed the information above and clarified to the best of our knowledge that the information provided is true and correct. The next page, the brokers have to sign, the broker for the seller. And then over on the right, the Realtor name. The broker is not gonna sign this. So it's gonna be you, the Realtor, that's gonna sign this, because it tells associate licensee or broker. And then number 3, it's the buyers. The buyer would sign there, and then below that, the broker, what says that on both of them? It is the broker's name that goes in there. I know it says agent, but the agent in this case is Keller Williams Benchmark Properties or Keller Williams Advisors. You can use either of those names. And then the Realtor name or signature is going to go over here, not the broker signature, guys. You remember that? Should not be left blank. Disclosure regarding real estate agency. I'm going to, okay, how many forms do I have left? Oh, 1 half. This one here tells the buyer and the seller your duties and what's expected of you, and that everybody needs to know who's representing who. And so, and on the purchase agreement on that page 1, it actually says, you write in who is representing who. Okay, remember it's Keller Williams by an agent, you have to have the DRE numbers, and everybody has to agree to who is representing them. If you're representing both buyer and seller, everybody has to know, because maybe somebody doesn't want it. I don't want you representing the buyer, says the seller. I want you representing just me. And then it also says that your company, Keller Williams Benchmark Properties, is the one that is the agent. You are a sub-agent of Keller Williams Benchmark Properties. You are a licensee under Keller Williams Benchmark Properties, but Keller Williams Benchmark Property is the one that owns every transaction in this office. You do not own it. And in this case, Keller Williams might be representing the buyer and the seller using 2 different agents. Are they going to be okay with that? That our company is going to represent both sides. I'm not going to as an agent, as a licensee, but somebody else in our office is. Have to make sure they're okay with that. And then down below, check your boxes. So if it's a buyer, you check the buyer box. If it's a seller, you check the seller box. They're not to be left blank. Gotta get the correct DRE number. If you guys have pens, I'm gonna give you the KW DRE number. Because everybody's writing down, putting in Steve's personal number, and you can't do that. So Keller Williams Benchmark Properties, 013450026. 013450026. That's Keller Williams Benchmark Properties. The offers that come in from Santa Clara County, on all of theirs, it shows Steve's personal ID, not Keller Williams Benchmark Properties. So if it's coming in from Santa Clara County or San Mateo County, you gotta have a counter offer. Or you tell them up front, send them a message saying, please use the DRE number 013450026. This one here, California Consumer Privacy Act. When their stuff goes on the multiple listing, they might start getting some solicitation, but we do not sell information. Bay East does not sell information. Some associations do. It's really complicated. But anyway, but Bay East does not, right, they don't sell your information. I don't know how many real estate companies don't. If you're a small company, you're allowed to do it. Possible representation of more than one buyer. We're gonna go through this one rather quickly. So when you are working with a buyer or you are working with a seller, they need to, this form is telling them that Keller Williams Benchmark Properties, remember they own the transactions, they are representing more than just you. You're not our only client. We have to make sure that you realize that. And that when all these agents in our office are showing property, they're showing other properties. Maybe they're gonna show your property, maybe they're not. But you have to be aware of the fact that we have a lot of agents, they might show your property, they might not. I have other clients that I'm showing properties to. I might show your property, I might not. It depends on what they're looking for. So they have to be aware that there are other, that they're not the only client. Buyer or seller, they are not the only client that Keller Williams has. Apparently there was a lawsuit, many, many years ago where somebody said, you didn't tell me that you were working with other people. Yes, and so whenever there's a lawsuit, a new form comes out. Yep. That's why they just keep growing. Any questions on that form? This is one that buyer and seller both have to sign. They have to sign the same one. The Wildfire Disaster Advisory. I had to put this in because Steve wanted it in here. The Natural Hazard Disclosure Report will say if you're in a severe fire hazard, a high fire hazard, a medium one, a low one, no fire hazard, and you've got all these areas that you can look. We do not require this form if you are not in a severe or a high fire hazard zone. I swear every other real estate company out there does. And I don't know why, your house is downtown Newark, and they've got this wildfire disaster advisory in there. Who knows why? I have no idea. There's no wildfire advice, there's no wildfires in Newark, Fremont, Union City. There might be up in the hills, then it might be. I know San Leandro has areas. I'm gonna be staying in a place this weekend where they are in a high fire hazard disaster area, whatever it's called. But we do not require this form. You can let your buyers sign it if you get it from a seller. They can sign it, it's a silly form, it's not silly, it's a very good form. You can tell them we're not in a high fire hazard, if it's not. Would you look at the NHD, or you go to one of these websites? I went to the websites to make sure they did it. And there is a lot of them, there's a lot of them in the Bay Area. All along 680, to the east of 680 is all fire hazard area. Fire hardening. Do you guys know what fire hardening and defensible space is? Okay, so when you live up in the mountains or in one of these areas, and you have all these trees and they drop needles, every year, every fall before the fires start, you have to go and clean up your space. You have to rake it. You have to rake, it's a certain area. I don't know what the diameter is that you have to do, but you have to rake this area and get rid of these dead needles and dead leaves, because they will catch on fire. They catch on fire too easily. Yeah, and so that's fire hardening and defensible space. Defensible space is cleaning up the area that is in a high or severe fire hazard.
Now, is that required if you're not in one of those areas?
Huh.
Okay.
No, it's only if you're in one of those areas. Even if the property is not specified, okay, so C on the next page, even if the property is not in either of the zones specified above, or if the seller is unable to determine whether the property is in either of those zones, if the property is in or near a mountainous area, covered, forest-covered lands, brush-covered lands, grass-covered lands, or land that is covered with flammable materials, a seller may choose to make the disclosure because the buyer might consider the information material. Reports in the seller's possession that materially affected the value and desirability of the property shall be delivered as provided by the agreement. So, great. So you can choose to do it if you, we don't choose to do it. Fire hardening and defensible space. I'm probably not gonna get through this one much. But again, you're gonna see this come from other companies. And it says, number one, law applicability. If this property does not meet the conditions stated in paragraph A1 or AB, there is no requirement to complete the subsequent applicable paragraphs. And it doesn't, like down here in Fremont, it doesn't. Home fire hardening disclosure. The notice and disclosure of vulnerabilities in paragraph 2 is only required for sellers of residential properties if the property contains one to 4 units, that's a yes. The seller is required to complete a real estate transfer disclosure statement, that's gonna be yes for the most part. The property is located in either high or very high fire hazard severity zone, could be yes, could be no. And then if it's a no, then it doesn't apply. And the improvement of the property was constructed before January 1st, 2010. Right, so if it was, after January 2010, houses were built better to, more fireproof, right, so that they don't catch on fire so easily. And defensible space compliance, the disclosure requirements specified in paragraph 3 are only required for the sellers of residential properties if the property contains 1 to 4 units. The seller is required to complete the real estate transfer disclosure statement. The property is located either, it's the same things. So you only have to do this form if there is no requirement, read the paragraph again. You can read it later, I don't want to go through it again, but it's not required in areas that aren't high or severely high fire hazard areas. Okay, so now let's say you are. Now you have to fill out number 2. If paragraph 2B is only required to be completed if all 4 conditions in paragraph 1A are met. So then you'd have to say, you'd have to complete it. So you're gonna see it not completed because they just turn in this form and it's not in a severe or high, or severe, high or severe, higher, God, it's so hard to say that. High or severe fire hazard zone. So then they don't have to complete this, but they send it to you. That's silly. And then it talks about the defensible space, disclosure, and addendum. So if you're doing something along 680, up in the mountainous areas, you'll need this form. And then you'll have to read the whole thing. We're gonna go on to the next one. It's already 2:30. Oh, defensible. Goodness. Some more about defensible space. Not gonna talk about it. It's a continuation of the last one. Okay, representative capacity signature disclosure. So, in this group of papers again, we are going to go to the California Residential Purchase Agreement and the Residential Listing Agreement, these two pages. So they're like it's like page 15 of the purchase agreement and it's page 5 of the listing agreement. Okay? If you do, on the residential purchase agreement, if you do 32B correctly, you don't need this form, representative capacity signature disclosure, because that takes care of it. So if you can fill out 32B or 33B, would also be 33B in case you're the seller, you would have to check B, entity seller. That would mean that it's probably going to be in a trust, or it could be an LLC. That's right. LLC, trust, probate, any of these things that you're going to see here on this trust, entity, power of attorney, or estate. Check that box, and then you would have to do number 3. The name of the legal authorized signer is, put in their name. And then under 4, if a trust, identify the buyer. It tells you right here, identify the buyer as the trustee of the trust, or simplified trust name like John Doe co-trustee, Jane Doe co-trustee, or the Doe Revocable Family Trust. It is so simple. If you don't do that, and it is one of these things, now you gotta fill out this other form that's 2 pages long. So, the listing agreement as a seller. Under 25, entity seller. If they're one of those things again, you would check the box, entity seller, put in under 3, put in the name of the legal authorized signer, and 4, if a trust, identify the seller as, it says the same thing. If you complete these things correctly, you won't need this form, which is for the seller, because you'll see right up here under the green up at the top. You see where representative capacity signature, this is a CR form, RCSD-S. That S means a seller. Got it? Okay. And it is a long form, guys. Look at it, it's 2 pages long. The next one, same form, kind of the same form, only this one is right under those same words for buyer representatives, CAR form RCSD-B. B means buyer, okay? So this would be for a buyer if you don't fill out these things properly. The other one is for a seller if you don't fill out these things properly. So much easier. So much easier. And it says the same things, you know, if in a trust, in the blank line above, identify the buyer as the trustee, or simplified John Doe trust, you know, co-trustee, all that kind of stuff. It's the same form, but it's a whole lot longer. And you gotta fill in all this other stuff. You scrolling down, yeah, oh, yours is what, bigger than mine. And then on the next page, at the time of the buyer representation agreement, you would have to fill this part out. It's just, remember to do it right on here. If you guys need help, come and see me. Okay, I don't want you to do these other forms anymore. Next one, buyer investigation election number, whatever. I know. Okay, this one is, the next 3 forms kind of go together. They're so hard to explain. Okay, so you can do this one when you first sit down with your buyer, saying, what do you want to do here? Of all these inspections, do you want to do any of them? do you wanna do, number one, do you wanna do a home inspection? Well, we received a home inspection from the seller. Are we good with that one? And they usually ask me, is it a good one? And I'll say, well, I respect the people who did that report. They would be somebody that I would hire myself. I said, so it's up to you if you want to get another one. They're about $700 these days, the home inspection. And they'll say, no, we don't need another one. I'll go along with it. But if you don't like the form, like, let's say they have a lot of unknowns on something, like the pest form, the pest inspection. If the pest inspector does a lot of unknowns, I feel like they didn't do their job. And I'll say, I think you should maybe hire a pest inspector. Let's do a second pest inspection. And the roof, the same way, Wanda just had Wanda Rothstein. The inspector that the sellers hired, not that Wanda hired, but the sellers hired, was a scammer. I didn't even know there was one that existed. He's a scam. And when she put it into the disclosure IO on the MLS, agents called her and said, do you realize that that inspector is a scammer? He found nothing wrong in the pest. He did all 3 inspections. Nothing wrong with the pests, nothing wrong with the home, nothing wrong in the general home inspection. The house was perfect. 1950 home, 1958 home. House was perfect. Roof, nothing wrong with the roof. And so the sellers were really happy. And now the buyers come and they say, we want the seller to do 3 more inspections. And the sellers got so upset. But they hired, they wouldn't listen to Wanda. They've got to listen to you guys. It's just, you got to somehow make them believe you. And so they had to do 3 more inspections, pay $1,000, which is what they should have just paid up front. But they paid this other guy, I think, like 500 or something.
Where do you
He's a
find this
scammer.
guy? Where do you find someone like that?
I don't know where they found him.
Yellow card.
I don't know, but so, look at the reports, make sure you look at them, and, because there should be something wrong with the house. Even a brand new house, there should be something wrong with them.
So
And
the
so-
seller, the seller wanted that guy to do the inspections?
Say it again?
The seller wanted that guy to do the inspections?
Yeah, because he was so cheap. All the other people they called were really expensive.
But then the buyers caught it, and then.
Oh,
they
yeah.
requested it.
Well, Wanda caught it also. She told him before the buyers even came in, because the agents had called her and told her. Yeah, we're looking at the disclosure IOs, the inspections and the multiple listing. So we've got 43 listed. Typically, if you don't get the number 1, general home inspection, if you don't get they're in alphabetical order. I think they're in alphabetical, they're not in alphabetical order. There's one in here that's a pest. Oh, wood destroying pest, number 2. And then there's a roof one, numbers 15. Those are the 3 general ones that we typically get. If it's an HOA, usually you don't get a roof because the HOA owns the roof. It's not true in all complexes, but typically they do. If from the general property inspection, you might want to do some, because the general property inspector might start talking about the foundation. And then you might want to do a foundation. If you've removed your contingencies, you can still, if you put it in the contract correctly, you can still do more inspections. But you can't do anything about it. You can't ask for repairs if you've removed your contingencies. You can't back out if you've removed your contingencies. I mean, you can, but you're gonna lose money. Some people do want a plumbing. A little difficult to get a plumber out there, even more difficult to get an electrician. It's like impossible to get an electrician, so you really have to go off of that general home inspection. Because if you get a good one, they're pretty good about saying what's wrong with them. And you can get electricians and plumbers, but it takes a while. Sewer, when you're up in Oakland and Berkeley and up in Contra Costa County, I think Castro Valley is also asking now, they want sewer laterals, inspections done, the cities do, and they have to get clearance before you close escrow. They make exceptions if the repairs are gonna be done after escrow. You have like 60 days to get it done or something after escrow. But if it hasn't been done by the seller, you'll want your buyer to do a sewer lateral inspection, especially in those, they have to do them in those cities. You can even do them down here. So you can just go through this whole thing. They're gonna ask you about some questions like radon gas. You can always go on to Google, where is radon gas in California? And it'll show you where it is. And if it's not in this area, and typically not in this area. So there's a few pockets here and there where there's some radon gas. Asbestos, they can do an asbestos inspection by, you have to take some of the asbestos off and take it in for inspection to a special company. I don't know who they are. If it was built before 1978, again, I think it is, it probably has asbestos in the house. Like it would be in, there's some linoleum, old linoleum, like you find it in a furnace room, like where your furnace is. In that furnace closet, you might find some old linoleum that never got replaced. That glue has asbestos in it more than likely. The houses that have that acoustic ceiling built before 1978, more than likely has asbestos in it. All that insulation around your furnace pipes probably has asbestos in it if it was built before 1978, because it's fire retardant. It didn't catch on fire. Well, it didn't catch on fire easily, so it was a wonderful product. I think I've told some people that. Wonderful product. It did not catch on fire easily, and that's why they used it. But then they found out when it becomes airborne, that's perfect if it just sits around that furnace. If it just sits in the ceiling, if it just sits there and nobody disturbs it, there's nothing wrong with it. But if you start sanding, scraping it down, pulling it off your furnace, now you're gonna get some airborne stuff and you just have to wear you want the proper person to come in and do it. But you could just go through these things. They'll just ask you, do you think I need this? Do you think I need this? And we just say, well, let's look at the property inspection and see what they say. Now the next one is kind of a mirror image of the first one, of the one we just saw. The only things it's missing is the general home inspection and the wood destroying pest inspection. They were number 1 and 2. All the rest of them are on here. And so now when you say, I don't want the rest of those inspections, you have to do it on this sheet. And they have to initial every area, every one of these that they don't want. Now you see number 13, roof, it's there. So if they're initialing and they still want a roof inspection, you gotta make sure that one doesn't get initialed. What I have been doing, because I do my own transactions. I have them initial that top, like by the chimney, and then I take a red line and draw down, and I'll just skip over the ones that they still wanna do, so that it's open, and then I drag my red line below that, down to the bottom, and do it on all, if there's two signers, I do it on all 4 columns. Right, or you can just simply have them initial each one that they don't want to do. So remember on the other one, it was what they do want to do. This is what they're now saying, right, I really don't want these. Any questions on this one? The next one gets harder. These were pretty cut and dry. Okay, next one is the fire inspection waiver. So, number 3, waivers. Here it covers the home inspection waiver and B, wood destroying pest inspection waiver. That's why it's not on that form before, because you get to waive them on this one. And let's see, how can I do this easily? So if you want to do a home inspection and or a wood destroying pest inspection, you would not initial there. Let's say you even got one, like you got one from the seller, and you still want to do your own, you would not initial. Now, if you got some from the seller and you don't want to do any more, like I'm not going to do any more, you now initial those. So I'm not going to do any more, I'm going to accept the sellers. You would initial A, I don't want another home inspection. You would initial B, I don't want a wood destroying pest inspection, I've got one, that kind of thing. Under C, the broker recommends that the buyer obtain an inspection on the following items. You would typically get this from the home inspection report. Like if they suggest, like if they say that there was water under the sink, but everything is dry, we recommend that you get a licensed plumber out here. Right, and so you would say, a plumber. plumbing inspection, or electrical inspection, any of those kind of things that you feel they should have. And you would typically get that from that inspection report. Now you've got number 4. So, okay, so if you aren't gonna do any further inspections, you would initial down there under C. If you do want further inspections, you don't initial. Remember that form before, you initial everything you don't want, is that right? Yeah, everything you don't want. And on this one, you would initial it if you don't want. So that's kind of the same, okay, so they kind of run, yes, you initial if you don't want.
But this is for the buyers, correct?
This is only for the buyers. You do not send these forms to the sellers, okay? They're gonna ask for them, like I'm in one right now, and the transaction coordinator said, we want your BIE or BIW. And I said, well, I'm not sending them to you, the buyer forms. You know, the seller has nowhere to sign, and so we don't send those out in our office. Right? And she asked me again, and I said, nope, I'm not gonna send it. She asked me again, and I said, nope, I'm not gonna send it. And then finally, they have to ask so many times. And so I probably became a difficult agent, I don't know, but they're not getting my buyer forms. They don't need them. Down under number 4, yes, waiver of additional inspections recommended by other reports. These are the reports that you would get from the seller. These are not the reports that you would have ordered. These are the reports that the seller ordered and gave them to you, or the seller has and gave them to you. Because maybe they had another buyer come in and do an inspection, you know, and the buyer backed out or something. That would come from the seller, but the seller didn't actually pay for that report. So anyway, so if somebody else gives you a report, you would write them in. Checkbox, general home inspection, property prepared by, the company that it's prepared by, and the date it was done. Very important that you put that date in. Question?
What's the average life of an inspection, where it's considered valid, 6 months or what? Like if you have an inspection?
That's between you and the buyer, the seller and the buyer. It really is. Somebody just turned one in, 2 years old. They said they aren't gonna do any more inspections. It's only 2 years old, they can go off of these. You know, I don't know if the buyer did more inspections or not. I don't know if I finished reviewing that file or if Renee did. But right, so it's all in the eye of the buyer and seller, what they consider recent enough. If they gave you a wood destroying pest and organism report prepared by, you would check the box, prepared by, and again, the dated. And then other, that could be roof, because a lot of them will give you the 3 reports, and that would be prepared by and dated again. It could be a pool report. It could be a foundation report. It could be whatever the seller wants to put in, whatever you, the buyer's agent, wants to put in there. And then out of those reports, just those specific reports, do they want to do any further reports? The buyer recommends that buyer obtain additional the report recommends that buyer obtain additional investigation. Broker recommends that buyer obtain those additional investigations. If you do not do so, you are acting against the advice of the broker. If they still don't want to do any further inspections, they initial there. Okay. But keep in mind that number 4 is the reports you get that you didn't pay for. The reports you get from someone else. Does everybody understand that?
Mm-hmm.
Because it sure doesn't work that way when you start doing these forms and turn them in. Okay, next form. This one is just an advisory. Are you on it? Seller advisory, okay. So when I take a listing, I actually take this form with me. It's put in the property address, and you are going to let them know that the broker is gonna check their records to see if they have sold or listed that property in the last, I think it's the last 3 years, it could be the last 5 years. And you can ask them, say, did Keller Williams Benchmark Properties, were they the listing agent, or did you work with them as the buyer's agent? And then you have to go online. Like you can always go into the MLS. I don't know if you guys know where to find this. In the MLS, right below the pictures, you and I, did we just do those little icons? Under there's a history icon. And you can click on the history icon that's below the pictures, and it'll show you who's represented them in the last 10 years. We only have to go back so far. You didn't know that? Oh, I didn't teach you that, I'm sorry. So anyway, those icons are right below it. Click on those little icons, they'll tell you exactly what they are, just scroll over them. Yeah, and they'll show you what they are. And then you can click on them and see what they are. Next form is, okay, so let's say that we did, Keller Williams, did represent them as a buyer or a seller. We now have historical documents on that property. And the next owner has to get all of the historical documents plus the new documents. Right, so here is where, I don't think the form is big enough, because here is where you have to list them all. You have to list, like, all the disclosures, or maybe you could just say personal disclosures. I list them all. TDS, SPQ, lead-based paint, you know, all of them. And I might use 2 of these forms, or fill it in at the bottom or something. You have to list all the inspections, the preliminary title report, the NHD, everything. Everything that you had in that file has to now go to the next buyer. Yeah, this isn't fun. I don't like this one at all, but it's there. I'm done. And it is 10 minutes left. Do you want me to go back to some other form that I didn't hit on? Or you had enough? You had enough?
No, it's good.
Okay, yes, Rosie, but speak up. I don't,
Can you hear me
I'm
now?
getting old.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, I want to ask, what if someone, doesn't have, the city, do a permit on a property that they're selling? They don't.
What if they don't have what permit?
Permits, they don't do permits on property that they're selling?
They just have to disclose it.
Okay, so that would be on which form?
Which form was that, guys?
Is that the SPQ?
We went over this. Which form was that?
Is that the SPQ?
It's either the SPQ or the TDS,
Okay,
and it might be on both.
okay.
Let me see, page 2 of the TDS. There we go. It's under C, and it is under 4, C4, C5 is building codes, so it's under there. And I think it's also on the SPQ, but I don't know. Any other questions? What?
I have another legal question.
I don't know, not,
Yeah,
consult
well,
your
you know,
attorney, okay?
You can, you don't have to answer this, but you should. Anyway, basically, as you do, I always sit down with the client and go over all of these forms, okay? Now, since we live in a very ethnically diverse area, I often translate some of these forms for them, or whatever. This is loaded. Am I liable
Sure.
for doing that?
Sure. Absolutely you are. Now, you can bring up, you can change these forms to Spanish, because I know
No,
you're
but-
Spanish.
Yeah, but it could,
Yeah, but I
there's
don't
other
know.
languages too that may
Yeah,
or may
but I don't
not.
know about, I think you can actually get this form in Mandarin too. I don't know about all the Indian dialects, the Indian forms.
But what would be the recommendation for something
Hire a
like that?
professional. Like, I had a deaf client, and I don't sign, and she had a friend come in and sign, be the interpreter. I found out that was like the hugest mistake I could ever have made, because that friend,
Oh, yeah.
that friend interpreted her feelings into it, and I didn't know that. I didn't know what was going on. 5 days before closing, the buyer backs out. Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, she still continued to keep me as a buying agent, but from then on, we had a professional interpreter. If it's something you have to pay for, do it. Absolutely pay for it. It is worth it.
I suppose you could do that for languages too, right? Hire a professional.
Yep, hire a professional if you want, but if it was me, I would be translating myself, I'm sure. I'm sure I would. But not, well, not that, well, that was not good. Anyway, if that's it, supposed to bring up one more thing, guys, I'm sorry, Steve today tells me, bring up the Fair Appraisal Act Addendum. It's now part of the listing agreement and part of the purchase agreement. And it just says appraisers cannot be discriminating anymore.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
well, yeah, they were terrible in the past, horrible. They would, yeah. Anyway, they're not allowed to do that anymore, and if you think they are doing it, As a seller, because they're not appraising your property, you feel it's worth more because you've got the comps to show it. Or if you're a buyer and you feel that they appraised the property too high, and you didn't really think it should be appraised that high because you have the comps, you know, that kind of thing. There's a website in here you can go to and complain. Yep. Appraisers. We hired an attorney once, one of my sellers hired an attorney. Because that appraiser was, yeah, he came back, or they hired, I think he came back and did a new one, and he appraised the property for what it should be appraised for. Oh, she was bad. Okay, thank you, Adrian. If you have any questions, you can always come knock at my door.
Thank you.
Question is, why would you wanna be a Realtor?